In 1991, San Diego, a young man stands in a convenience store with a gun in his hand. His name is Kenyatta Leal. He's about to make a decision that will cost him nearly 2 decades of his life. The armed robbery nets him 3 years in prison. Most people learn from that kind of mistake. Kenyatta doesn't. Released at 25, he's back on the streets within months. Same crowd, same troubles, same destructive choices. This time, the charge is simple possession of a firearm as an ex-felon. Simple, but devastating. Under California's 3 strikes law, this third strike means one thing: life in prison. At 25, Kenyatta Leal was handed a sentence that should have ended his story. Instead, it became the beginning of something extraordinary. From a life sentence in San Quentin to a career in Silicon Valley. This is the story of second chances. San Diego in the 1980s and 90s wasn't an easy place to grow up if you were young, black, and poor. The crack epidemic was devastating communities. Gang violence was escalating. For kids like Kenyatta, the streets offered more opportunity than the classroom. Kenyatta grew up in a broken home with an absent father. No male role models, no guidance through the minefield of adolescence. By his teens, he dropped out of school and found his education on the streets. Drug dealing wasn't just about money. It was about respect, status, belonging to something larger than yourself. When you're young and desperate for identity, the fast life looks like the only life worth living. But the fast life has consequences. In 1991, at just 22 years old, Kenyatta's involvement in an armed robbery landed him his first felony conviction: 3 years in state prison. Enough time to reflect, to change course, to choose a different path. He didn't. Released at 25, Kenyatta walked straight back into the same neighborhood, the same crowd, the same destructive patterns that had put him behind bars in the first place. Within months, he was arrested again, this time for something seemingly minor: possession of a firearm as a convicted felon. Under normal circumstances, that might mean a few more years in prison. But California's 3 strikes law had changed the game entirely. This wasn't just another arrest, it was strike 3. The gavel came down with finality. 25 years to life in San Quentin State Prison. At 25, Kenyatta faced the very real possibility that he would die behind bars. The system had written him off as irredeemable. Society had decided he was too dangerous for a second chance. Kenyatta decided something different. He chose to give himself a second chance. San Quentin State Prison sits on the San Francisco Bay like a fortress of despair. Built in 1852, it houses some of California's most dangerous criminals. Death row inmates, lifers. Men society had decided were beyond redemption. When Kenyatta arrived at San Quentin, he was just another number in the system. Another life sentence warehoused away from society. But something inside him refused to accept that fate. The early years were about survival. Learning the unwritten rules of prison life. Navigating the complex social hierarchies that determine whether you live or die behind bars. Avoiding the violence that could end your life or add decades to your sentence. But Kenyatta had always possessed something that made him different from other inmates. Entrepreneurial instincts, a mind that saw opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Initially, he channeled that energy into traditional prison pursuits. He attended real estate school, studying for licenses he couldn't use from behind bars. He learned trades, plumbing, electrical work, anything that might provide value when he eventually got out, if he ever got out. The turning point came in 2010 when Kenyatta encountered a program that would change not just his life, but the lives of hundreds of other inmates. The Last Mile had just launched at San Quentin. Founded by entrepreneur Chris Redlitz and his wife Beverly Parenti, the program brought business education and entrepreneurship training into one of America's most notorious prisons. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of focusing on traditional vocational training, welding, carpentry, basic job skills, The Last Mile taught inmates to think like entrepreneurs, to solve problems, to create value, to build businesses. For someone like Kenyatta, who'd always had entrepreneurial instincts channeled in the wrong direction, it was like discovering oxygen. The program was about developing real skills for the modern economy: computer literacy, digital marketing, and eventually something that would become Kenyatta's passion and salvation: computer programming. In 2013, The Last Mile launched Code 7370, a computer programming curriculum designed specifically for prison environments. The program faced a seemingly impossible challenge. How do you teach coding to inmates who have no internet access? The solution was brilliant in its simplicity. CodePoint 7370 created a proprietary offline platform that simulated the web development environment. Inmates could learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript without ever connecting to the outside world. For Kenyatta, coding represented something profound. Software engineering was one of the few fields that truly valued merit over background. As he put it, software engineers are judged by the quality of the code they develop, not by the stigma of criminality. Here was a career where his past didn't matter, where a life sentence didn't disqualify him from success, where talent and dedication were the only currencies that counted. Kenyatta threw himself into programming with the intensity of a man whose life depended on it, because it did. He wasn't just learning to code, he was learning to rebuild himself from the ground up. Every line of code was an act of defiance against a system that had written him off. Every program he wrote was proof that transformation was possible. But Kenyatta didn't keep this knowledge to himself. He became a mentor, teacher, and advocate within the prison walls. He helped design curriculum improvements. He encouraged other lifers to join the program. He proved that even men serving life sentences could create value, solve problems, and contribute to something larger than themselves. The results were extraordinary. Code 7370 boasted a 0% recidivism rate among graduates. Not 2%, not 5%. 0. No graduate of the program had returned to prison. That kind of success doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you give people hope, skills, and a pathway to legitimate success. In 2013, after serving 19 years of his life sentence, something remarkable happened. California's prison overcrowding crisis led to resentencing for certain nonviolent offenders. Kenyatta's case was reviewed. The man who walked out of San Quentin in 2013 was completely different from the 25-year-old who had entered nearly 2 decades earlier. He had coding skills, business knowledge, a network of mentors and advocates who believed in second chances. Most importantly, he had purpose. Kenyatta's first job after prison was hardly glamorous: campus services at Rocket Space, a San Francisco co-working facility. His duties included scraping gum off floors and emptying trash cans. Most formerly incarcerated people might see that as demeaning work. Kenyatta saw it as opportunity. He was in the heart of Silicon Valley, surrounded by entrepreneurs, investors, and innovators. While emptying their trash cans, he was learning their language, understanding their problems, building relationships that would transform his life. His supervisor at Rocket Space quickly recognized that Kenyatta was overqualified for janitorial work. Within months, he was promoted to campus manager. His responsibilities expanded to include event coordination, client relations, and business development. But Kenyatta's real passion remained with the last mile and Code 7370. He became an evangelist for the program, speaking at conferences and corporate events about the power of second chances. He co-founded Code 7370 as an independent organization, expanding the program to multiple prisons across California. The curriculum he helped develop was teaching hundreds of inmates valuable 21st century skills. But more than that, it was giving them hope. Today, Kenyatta Leal stands as one of the most compelling voices in criminal justice reform and workforce development. He trains Fortune 500 companies on how to recruit and support employees with criminal backgrounds. His message is simple but powerful. Talent exists everywhere, including behind prison walls. The question isn't whether formerly incarcerated people can contribute to society. The question is whether society is smart enough to recognize and utilize that talent. Code 7370 continues to expand under Kenyatta's leadership. The program has grown beyond basic web development to include advanced programming languages, digital marketing, and entrepreneurship training. Graduates aren't just finding jobs, they're starting companies, leading teams, and transforming entire industries. The program's success metrics remain extraordinary. Zero recidivism among graduates, 100% employment rate, average starting salaries well above minimum wage, living wages that allow graduates to support families and contribute to their communities. TLM Works, the employment agency that grew out of Code 7370, specifically focuses on placing formerly incarcerated workers in technology companies. It's not charity, it's good business. These employees bring unique perspectives, unmatched determination, and loyalty that comes from genuine second chances. Kenyatta also serves on numerous advisory boards and advocacy organizations focused on criminal justice reform. He consults with state governments on prison programming and reentry services. He speaks at conferences around the world about the power of education and entrepreneurship to break cycles of incarceration. But perhaps his most important role is as living proof that transformation is possible. The young man who dropped out of school and chose a life of crime, who served nearly 19 years on a life sentence, who learned to code without internet access behind the walls of San Quentin. That man now stands in boardrooms of major corporations, teaching them how to recognize talent regardless of background. He walks the halls of Silicon Valley startups as an equal, not a charity case. His journey from armed robber to tech entrepreneur challenges every assumption about criminal justice, redemption, and second chances. Thanks for watching this episode. Sometimes the greatest victories come from the deepest defeats. If this inspired you to never give up on yourself or others, smash that like button. Subscribe for more content. Turn on notifications because everyone needs reminders that miracles happen through hard work and determination, and don't forget to share the inspiration.